just trying to get all of the metal down deeply into the ball. In the case of mine, the deepest spot is the very center, so it's where I work. Same thing for all the other lames. Not really putting much shape in with this operation. It's basically just giving a little bit of curvature. The final lame is just being worked along the last edge. I leave this section out here relatively undished. You can get a little more depth out of your dish by tilting the piece up. If I lay it down, it'll just have this amount of curve. But I could actually tilt it and get additional depth out of it. You can see it's no longer touching it. You can actually dish on a flat surface. It just takes a little more hammer control. The next step is using a deeper dish and a small ball-faced hammer to put in more depth along the knuckle edges of each side. I'm putting my depth in a slight arc across the range of the knuckles. And as I'm doing it, I'm also tipping the lame to maximize the depth. I'm not whaling really hard. I don't want to thin it out too much. Same time I'm pulling with my left hand, as I'm curving it, I'm trying to give it a tighter shape. In particular, down around the edges. You can see I've got an arch going this way as well as curvature going this way. Same thing for the front edge, but not nearly as deeply. And I'll use a smaller ball. Once again, I'm turning it this way as I curve. As I hammer, I'm pulling as I go. At this point, I have a double bubble. What I'm really looking for is not much of a bubble here, but a fairly distinct bubble up here. Now I move on to the next lane. Same process as before, working only the rear edge. Starting in the center, because in this case I did not dish this section out here, so working from the center is important. Also working an arc in this case. The bubble's fairly wide on the final lane. At this point I'm just lightly tapping this area out here to help it fold. I'll clean this up later. These get a little difficult to hold. Notice I'm tipping up still. Slightly smaller hammer to push this section down. A pretty pronounced bubble. But right now it doesn't go all the way up to the end, so I need to make it come out to the end. Now the bubble is more or less the shape I want it to have. I'll move on to the metacarpal plate now. The metacarpal plate gets dished in the same way as the second bubble of the first lane we met, which is with a smaller hammer and really just along the leading edge. Still curving it like this, pulling it, so as to make the metal maximize the amount of curvature I get out of the dishes. You can see the slight embossing I have going across this section. Our next step will be to roll the ends of this more closed so that we can create the correct amount of shape across the back of the hand. The horn of your anvil is the right place to do curving. Just use your body weight to curve the piece around. You're looking for a shape that's ovoid, and you want to have a little bit more of your curve right here. You can use a hammer to help, using the narrow portion of the horn, You can move the metal a little bit easier along the point. But you just generally use your body weight. Give yourself the curvature that you're looking for. At this point, my plates basically fit, and I have a slightly oval shape. One of the ways that I work on it is I take the plates and I squeeze them together, and as they spring out, they fit the shape much better. I want to bring the points of this in a little bit better so that it fits my hand just a bit better. Do that again. Use the rawhide mallet this time. And voila. Little tweaking here. And that's more what I'm looking for. The next step is using a flat-faced hammer to refine the shape of the embossments. I try to do this in even passes, working from right to left, and then I'll do some additional courses going down across to pull it. I won't need to do nearly as much of that with this metacarpal plate because there's not much embossing. But when I get to the lames that have the deep embossments, then I'll need to do a whole lot more of it. At this point, I am both planishing by smoothing it with a flat-faced hammer and forming. If I want to pull it down more, I can do passes like this, where I move this direction. This plate has a slight ridge here. For a metacarpal plate, I'm really going to want to eliminate as much of this ridge as I can, so I'll be working on that a little bit later. But for right now, I just want it to be smooth. I have a little bit more depth over here than I do over here. That's okay. It's by accident, but it'll be cleaned up in the next stage. The next step is to bring the edges down of this first lane. Right now it is a uniform curve. We want it to come down a little bit more on the ends. Just do that over the ball stake. Trying not to make any distinct hammer marks in it. What we're looking for is a shape that's a little bit less uniform, a little bit more shaped like a hand. And we need to see if we can get the pieces to fit pretty well. They actually do already fit pretty closely without any tweaking. There's not a lot of gapping. They're pretty close. So I'll tweak this point down a little bit. I'll tweak this point, but it's really minor, the amount of work. You notice there may be a slight difference here where this piece is slightly longer. That's done deliberately so that when I'm finished I can actually grind and clean up the edges to make them have a nice even uniform flow. Check the fit again. I would say that's pretty darned good considering I haven't even begun to tweak the first frame. So now the shaping, exactly the same as I did before, even passes this way and some additional courses this way. Because of the dishing we've already done, this metal is fairly thin here, so be careful with what you're doing. Doesn't take hard hits. I've just turned it around so I'm hammering this way because I'm kind of pushing the metal in. No particular reason you have to do that. It's just felt better from my hammering. Now I'm beginning the courses this direction to pull it in. These are not hard hammer hits. Just refining the shape a little, making it a little more uniform. It's looking fairly good. Now let's check the fit. The fit is pretty darned good. Look at that. All you can see is my hands. The fit is pretty darned good. Not a lot of gapping. Plates move the way they're supposed to. I'm going to make my articulation points in a little bit. Then I'll put the plates together and I will refine their shape so that they really fit. I'll do a little tweaking of the two plates together right now though. Although I'm hitting the outer plate in this operation, I'm doing most of my forming on the inner plates. I'll refine it out here a little bit too. Alright. Now that these two plates fit pretty well together, I move on to the next two. This one already has the shape, although I will tighten the tips of the fingers. And check this one. Of course, the fit is good, but the plate is by no means the right shape. So it's time to adjust this plate to bring it down. Because that's very... I'm trying not to make a crease, but rather to move the whole section out here. That shape is a little closer to what I'm looking for. Now I check the fit. It's good on this side, but this side's a little up. Easily remedied. Place it on the ball and give it a whack. A few hits like that and we should be in business. Okay. I'm going to refine the shape of this plate. This is the second lame, or first lame. Now that I have them roughly fitting. This refinement is as much for planishing as anything else, because the shape is pretty good. And that's pretty well refined. You can see the shape. There's a slight bubble out here and a fairly pronounced bubble back here. Check the fit again. Fits even better than it did before. Now to refine this plate. Like the bubble on the first lame, it'll probably take you a few passes. I sometimes hold it like this and squeeze it, especially when I'm working out in the ends, because they tend to flatten out. If you're working in spring steel like I am, heat may be your friend at this point. A little bit of heat and you can take care of some of the irregularities created by all the hammering, the stresses. That would be annealing it. You can also work this hot. I've done both. So I start my first pass across the ball. As I hammered here, this whole part just sprung open because of the tensions on it. Second pass. Third pass. Fourth pass. I'm going to do pass 5, at least starting it from the other side. Pass 4 is really the crest of this. It won't take 8 passes to go across because it's unequally shaped. This is pass 5, working back. Pass 6. Okay, really now what I need to do is work this part where it bulges out a little bit more. I'm refining the shape. I'm actually pushing this side back in a little bit and pulling this side out because I got a little uneven. So I'm holding this off the ball and pushing it down to the ball, whereas I'm pushing this on the ball and pushing this way with the plate. And also clean it up from the inside by striking it here. I'm not going to do that right now because there are better shapes to do that with. I'll clean that up later in the grinding phase. Let's check the fit. Fits pretty well. A little bit of a refinement by tweaking the pieces together. These fit pretty well. Maybe a little more tweaking out here. Now I'd say they fit quite well. And hopefully they still fit on the metacarpal plate. They do. All the plates fit together rather well. It's time to try some articulation. Center punch your holes so that you can find where they're going to be and then drill them. Take your lames and put them in the position that they will be in when the gauntlet is fully open. Mark your holes in this position. Then move the lame to the position that your gauntlet will be in the fully closed position. Mark the holes. And you should have 2 pairs of dots. A pair of dots here and a pair of dots here. By punching in between the 2 points, you'll have the exact position that the gauntlet is optimally articulated on in both positions, open and closed. Now it's time to make the holes and test your fit. In the optimal world, when you're done, you should just be able to see about half of the marker mark on this side and about half of the marker mark on this side. You've hit the dead center. Test fit the pieces with nuts and bolts. I use 8-inch holes, so I use 440 by 3/8 inch long nuts and bolts. 440 I think is optimal for 1/8 inch. Gives you a little bit of slop, a little bit of movement. They're also very easy to come by. At this point, the gauntlet is okay in the open position. It's a little tight in the closed position. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it and we're going to refine the shape now that the pieces are bolted together. And we're refining the closed position shape by working on the rear edge of the outer lame. And as I said, although I'm hammering the outer lame, I'm actually doing as much work or more to the inner lame. At this point, my lames move pretty well, and I think I'm ready to move on to the next one. A little bit of heat might make this easier, just to get all the plates to sit down in to their optimal positions. Because right now they're a little flat, so I'll probably use a little heat. Maybe I'll do that before I move on to the next articulation. No fancy tools are required. Just an ordinary propane torch for heating. The heat helps the pieces not change in directions they're not supposed to change in. Evens out the stresses in the metal. Particularly I'm working these outside corners with heat because that's where the most stresses are in place. I'm going to heat up the center section just to ease the tension between the two parts. At this point you can see that the fit is really quite uniform. Tapping this down here, and also refine this shape a little bit by just tightening the bolt. But right now it's too hot to touch, so I'm going to let it cool and come back to it in a couple of minutes. Now that these two plates articulate well, they go nice and far, they don't pop, they move nicely. It's time to do the same for the next lames. Check their fit. Mark them in the closed position, then the open position, and you're set. Test your fit with nuts and bolts. Everything works the way it's supposed to be. Now you can refine the shape a little to make it tighten up. Once again, the judicious application of heat will help everything to sit a little better. Tighten down my bolts before I heat. And it's flame on time. That's hot. That helps. Everything seems to fit better. I'm going to go ahead and heat the other edge as well, just to ease the tensions. Too hot to touch, but it seems like it's moving. Maybe a minor adjustment or two. Let's see what happens when it's cool. Now that the plates are cooled, I can check. All my lames articulate. There's very little in the way of gapping between the lames. Everything seems to be working out just fine. So it's time to work on rolling the edge of my cuff plate. When rolling the edge of a cuff, I make a very thin scratch using a compass to make sure I always know where the edge of the cuff is. I like to use a flat top, round edged stake. And I place the piece down on the stake and I start hammering it, the outside edge, on one of the straight parts. Try to be sure that I'm getting it folded right on the little scratch. I'm sure the scratch doesn't show up on the video, but there it is anyway. Once I get to this point, I can get the whole thing moved down. I start to move out to the rounded section. I'm not trying to do the entire roll in one pass, but rather making a little bit of a flange the whole way across. I take a bite a little further on and then fine tune it. again, I've got this part done, so I take a bite about here, push it down, and work it back this way. Kind of messed up there. Took a little bit too big of a bite. So I push it down. That's why I like this flat top steak. Because I'm hammered it, I'm having trouble seeing my line. So I'm going to go in and emphasize it a little bit. Right through that spot so I can see it. Whoops. You can tell when I've goofed up because it's when I'm hammering down. At this point I've rolled about half the cuff. I'm almost out at the edge. I find it's much easier to roll the cuff while it's still flat, but you can certainly roll your cuff and then roll the edge. Wind up putting a fair number of hammer marks in the roll, but they'll all be ground out, so it'll be okay. This section is awfully scratched up, so I'm going to emphasize the line. At this point, I can go back to the straighter portion and do that. At this point, it's pretty wavy and wonky, but that's okay, because that's just sort of to be expected. Now at this point I want to move it down a little further, second pass. Something approaching a right angle. I've always found that as I start to curve it, the whole piece starts to take a gentle curve because of the pressures that are being formed out here. That's actually the shape we want it to have. So I'm letting the rolling of the cuff edge do some of the rolling of the cuff itself. You can see a lot of the edges waver quite a bit. That's okay. I think the next stage is to do some of this hot. I think with a little more heat, we can make the edge roll a little more smoothly. I'm going to pay particular attention to rolling this area out here, out in the center of the cuff. Heat is almost a must for this. You certainly can do it without heat, but I wouldn't want to. I'm actually pushing it all the way up against the edge of this steak. That helps the edge be a little more uniform. This part that's not quite so curved, straighter, probably doesn't need the heat. Alright, that helps. Basically, I have something approaching a right angle for this whole area. The next step is to make it a little more uniform and to bring it over. One of the things I do at this point is I try to get it to come over instead of just bending and flattening, trying to roll it, trying to make it curl. So the next step is to actually pound down a little bit on the piece. Use a creasing stake to help curve. Now, I don't put it all the way as far in. I actually put it about halfway in, and I just tap it lightly. I'm not trying to crease. I'm just trying to roll over a little bit. One of the things I'm noticing about my cuff roll is that this part right in here is a little wide. It's a little thicker than this part, so I'm going to go grind it. Now it's a little more even. I can trim it. I've trimmed it and continue to roll. Remember, I'm not looking for a crease, just some closure. The idea is just to gently turn the whole roll. Careful not to make any creases or folds as you're going. At this point, I'm going to want to close it some more. All my blows at this point are essentially going straight into the steak. And now I need to close it the rest of the way. Next step, a little more heat, roll the edge. I really like to roll the edges using a ball stake. I happen to have this large 9-inch ball, which I think is great, but if you don't have one, you can roll it on a smaller ball. 4-inch should be fine. If you don't have that, use the horn of your anvil. You just need to support it, and a slightly curved surface will help with that. At this point, what I'm trying to do is roll it this way. So I'm actually hammering in that way. support it and actually roll it. I'm doing hammer blows like this. My purpose is to hit backwards so that I'm creating a nice uniform roll. I don't really need the heat in this straighter area. Sometimes it helps to have a hammer with a slightly curved face. To get into these areas. The slightly curved face hammer really does help me make the roll nice and uniform. At this point the roll is mostly made but not completely closed. What I want to do is I want to go in with the grinder and grind off the edge right in here just to try to make it a little more uniform. The next step is to curve the cuff. With a roll already on it, it's going to be a little more challenging to curve. Rawhide will be your friend. Using the horn of your anvil and being careful not to smash the roll you just spent quite a few minutes making. Start to curve your cuff around, remembering that it's not a tube but a section of a cone. Come around. Starting to get the shape I want it to have. Have to be very careful while working this so as to not form any creases. I have a tiny little crease here starting to form. That tiny little crease was probably caused by the fact that one section was more annealed, softer than the other. Point. It's getting pretty close to fitting. Two parts can be squeezed together, but basically that's what we need to have happen. What I need to do now is cut off the little section here so the two parts can overlap each other. I like to make my cut with a Dremel tool, but you could easily do it with a hacksaw, and even a chisel would do it. I like a Dremel because it's fast and it doesn't distort the metal at all. I like to use the point of my anvil. If I had a nice sharp edge, this would be easier. I have a slightly chamfered edge, but I can make do. Bending it back and then returning it to that plane, but very slightly offset from where it was. Heat makes this easier. This creates a slight stair step. Bring the cuff around until the parts basically meet up. Then you put it on your anvil and you hammer it. The idea is to bring the two parts together so that they can close perfectly. When you're pretty close, take a grinder and grind away this edge so that it's as perfectly flush as you can make it. At this point, I've made a hole. I've countersunk it by using a slightly larger drill bit, and I've stuck a rivet through. Take the vice grips off so I can get a better angle. And at this point, I'm not really trying to close up the rivet in a traditional mushroom headed shape, but rather I just want to push it down so I can use the flat face of my hammer for this. Because this is so close to the roll, I am going to wind up using the ball peen end. Next step is to make this next rivet hole. Same operation, put the hole through, clip the rivet to length, and peen it. Because it's a countersunk one, I peen like usual, but I can also peen with the flat because I want to fill the whole countersunk spot. These will eventually be ground flat and they'll be almost invisible. The next step is to make the cuff flare. I'm using bigger heat for this because I'm impatient. Also using a saddle stake because I like to use a saddle stake for this operation. It helps the pieces stay curved. Heat certainly makes this easier. Just tapping it lightly at this point. Now that the cuff basically fits, what you need to do is repeat the same two rivets that you have here up here. So you need to do the exact same operation of overlapping the two pieces. There's an alternative method of making the two pieces flush. Instead of creating the stair step, you can simply hang it off the edge while it's already riveted and overlapped. And carefully hammer the pieces together. This method works, but you have to take greater care to get all the pieces lined up. Now it's time to tighten the thumb. Then we need to chamfer this area in here and emboss this part of the thumb. To emboss the thumb, we place it on a slightly smaller ball than we were using before, but use the exact same operation. We embossed the thumb area in the same way that we did the other part. Now we have to chamfer this. Next step is to chamfer the edge. The next step is to curve the thumb plate. I have this little swage block. I used an old hammer handle. You can also do this over an open set of vice jaws. Just hammer it over the open space. Voila, one thumb plate. Same thing for the other one. Basically give it a curve before you start. Back into the half ball stake, chamfer the edge of the thumb plate. Back to the small ball stake to shape the thumb plates. And deal with the front edge. Very slight embossing. Now the tip of the thumb. Same deal as the others. The other option is to shape this in a shallow depression, like in a stump. Then you do the back edge. Same idea. Do it warm. It just doesn't take much. Just a little embossing. It's time to check the fit between the two plates. Basically, seems like it's a pretty good fit. This plate could probably take a little more embossing, so I'm going to use some heat. Now it's time to even out the back of the hand. We have this bubble here, and there's some irregularities in this transition. It's time to clean it up a little bit. We do that by laying this on the flat of an anvil and hitting any of those irregular spots. It's okay to have a bubble, but we don't want a really sharp transition. We especially don't want hammer marks. This one right here is a noticeable hammer mark on the outside. And that just generally makes the whole thing a bit smoother. At this point, all the pieces have been polished and been given a light coat of WD-40 to keep them from rusting while I'm working on them. Put your rivet through the hole and it's time to articulate. I use a small shim of metal with a notch cut from it that slides between the plates, and everything is set on a lead block, not a red block, a lead block. I clip the rivet a little longer than I need it, and I don't find any need for washers. What I'm doing is I am carefully mushrooming out the head I'm staying away from the center of the shank. This is just making a new head on the other side without thickening the shank. When I pull this out, the two plates move easily. Get the rivet on the other side, put it through the hole, slide in my shim, and cut to length. Repeat the process. Pull that and the plates move. I've got a little bit of gapping if I pull it to its farthest extreme, so I'm going to tighten it. Leave the shim out. Tighten the rivet. Tighten the rivet on the other side. And I'm in business. No gapping. Okay, same thing for the next plate. Joining this to the metacarpal. put the rivet into the hole, put the rivet on the lead block, slide in the shim, clip to length, I can pull it, repeat it for the other side. Oh, lost my rivet. And my plates will all move and do what they're supposed to do. Now it's time to tweak them a little bit and attach the cuff. Now it's time to fit the cuff into the gauntlet, the back of the hand metacarpal plate. What I do is I start moving this way and rolling it on. The cuff is most flared in this direction. So I place it into place and squeeze and pull. If I have trouble, I can use a hammer for a little persuasion. And basically it's fit together now. Time to rivet. Take your thumb plates, make the holes as marked on the patterns. Leave a little bit of the thumb tip sticking out so you can have something to sew it to. And mark the location of your holes on the leather. You can also make a mark where the back edge is, just so that the piece lines up correctly the next time you need it. You can then make your 2 holes and put the first rivets in. Use a leather punch. Make your holes. Put your rivets through the holes and push the thumb piece back into place. Put on your lead block, and you can tap them through even if they don't want to go. Then you can use your end nippers. You don't need to leave much sticking out. And you can peen the rivets like normal. Take the next thumb plate, slip it in under, have your holes already made, just like before. Line up the edges. Make those holes. Use some rivets and do the same thing you did before. At this point, your thumb plate is made. It articulates. Now you need to make 2 holes back here to match up with the holes that are already on your gauntlet. Mark your holes. Make your holes. And rivet it in just like before. Before you actually put the rivets in, you're going to want to trim off your excess leather. Use a marker to make your line, then just trim away whatever you don't need. Cut to the insides of the lines, and it disappears. Congratulations! We've now completed a pair of Milanese mitten gauntlets, circa 1450 to 1460. I hope you enjoy them. All you need to do now is put on your straps and your gloves, and you're ready for the tournament field. Happy armoring! Bye!